Do you like meet someone and they just seem like a beautiful soul? Or we probably might not be used to a bloke saying that about another bloke, but this guy, Sam Farmer, seems like one of those. He's a coaching psychologist, so whatever that means. But essentially he focuses on helping executives in stressful situations to navigate certain issues. I don't know how to explain it. But basically, he coaches CEOs that work in the non-profit sector as well as executives in the corporate sector. And it's just about to empower people and give them more sovereignty or control over their life. I don't know. I didn't actually ask what he specifically does, but he says a lot of great stuff and he makes a lot of great points. And we talk about a few controversial issues. Well, I do. That's a bit of a problem I have. But there is a lot of fascinating insights on this journey. He's a forensic psychologist, which anyone that's sort of got into that field realizes that's the bar, that's a high level. And has dedicated his life to the betterment of humanity. So a lot of great things. Even had a selfie with Pitbull. So nothing else to say. Let's kick into it. Oh yeah, and if you haven't subscribed to my newsletter, I don't know why. It's in the link. Just an easy way to pull everything together. I'm not going to suddenly spam call you. The phone, I get called. I don't know why I'm talking like this, but essentially newsletter. And let's kick into it.
All right, well, we've got Sam.
Thank you.
Welcome. I always find it interesting because, we just spent a whole year and then suddenly we're kicking off and like, whoosh, do you feel nervous or not? But I think as a good starting point with any podcast is like just context. Like, who are you? Why are you here? Nah, not so much the why are you here, but what do you do, Sam?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say ko monuiko te mona, ko waitemata te moana, ko ingarangi toku iwi no ingarangi aho, ko Sam Farmer toku ingoa. So just using the reo and just acknowledging Māori. And so introducing myself as Sam.
Okay.
Sam Farmer and the play, obviously I'm from England and that's, settled in New Zealand on the North Shore there. So that was what I was basically saying in my little Pepe Harrell intro at the beginning there. So repeat the question, sorry?
Nah. Well, okay. E tō mātua. Mātua te rangi. Kia tau mātua rangatiataga. So that was the question.
Oh,
no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh.
I just said the Lord's Prayer.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Māori, I need to upskill. Essentially, what do you do, Sam?
Okay, so I'm a coaching psychologist. And what I currently do is work with mainly in the not-for-profit sector. And I work with leaders of large not-for-profit organisations based in Auckland, in fact, around the country. And increasingly, actually, I work in the corporate sector as well, in coaching leaders in the corporate sector and also in the state sector. And also provide professional supervision to other coaches and psychologists.
That's a tough gig, non-profit. Is it hard to be profitable as a Sam? I know we're not going to talk to you
as a Sam
because you're helping non-profits, but then CEOs of those, well, I don't know what they're called. Are they called CEOs or
chief executive officers or executive directors? Yeah.
How do you live off that?
Well, they pay their staff, so they pay consultants as well. So
Okay, cool.
it's not done for free.
Good. Just wanted to check. I was worried about it.
But I mean, it's a good question, and I don't know the kinds of people you interview. We're all driven by different things, but certainly money is not the driving kind of motive. What's important for me and my values are kind of our meaningful work and good, meaningful relationships, quality work, and forget the other one, inner harmony. So when I'm looking for my working relationships, I want them to be meaningful. So the kind of pursuit is the engagement that I have with my clients. That's the kind of most important thing. Is can I relate to them? And then money's also important, but not as important.
Yeah, I mean, I think people that fixate on money and make that their goal, there was a wise prophet called Pitbull. Do you know him?
I do. I can tell you, I've met Pitbull.
You met Pitbull?
Shall I give you a backstory about Pitbull?
Yeah,
some work I do from time to time is with Médecins Sans Frontières or Doctors Without Borders, a humanitarian agency. And I was asked to go to Haiti and work with people in Haiti, as it's pronounced. And we flew from Florida via the Dominican Republic and then took a wee helicopter over the hill, which just about made it over the hill. Yeah. And there was this guy in the airplane, and he was everyone was kind of going all over him, and going to make a big deal, song and dance. So I said, well, who is this guy? And I said, oh, it's Pitbull. I said, no idea who Pitbull is, but I'm sure my son will know. So I chased him. Well, I didn't chase him, but we went to the luggage racks and stuff with him, and the baggage, where the baggage comes off. And I went up to him, and this big bouncer comes up and kind of, not wanting me to come forward. But Pitbull says, no, come forward. And I said, look, can I get a photograph of you? He said, no, you can get a photograph of me with you. So I've got a photograph of me with Pitbull. And I sent it to my son, and he just said, what? How did you do that? So there you go, Pitbull. So what did the great Pitbull say?
Money runs when you chase it.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Good fortune runs when you chase it with me and Pitbull. So
yeah. Well, appears so. You're a man. You're a famous.
Who'd know it? No.
Who else? Any other famous selfies?
No, that was it. I think you can't beat that, can you? Sorry.
It's up there.
Yeah,
Mr. Worldwide.
Yeah,
That's
right.
his nickname.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't expect. That's why I love this. You don't know what's going to happen. The whole selfie thing. I worry that like New Zealand's a bit different from America, but I think fame is salt water for the thirsty. So, yeah, you heard that saying?
No. That's your fame, is salt water for the thirsty.
No, I think fame is salt water for the thirsty. So,
okay, yeah.
So they're drinking in a mirage. They keep trying to fill an inadequacy with the validation of others. And,
okay.
And I just find the way for me to achieve the objectives that I want in life and make a more meaningful impact, I need to be in the public eye. And I just, I would hate the idea of people, hey, would you like a selfie? You did it very nice, but, when I see it online and just... So hopefully I'm not successful enough for that to happen.
Oh, well, who knows?
You never know. So speaking of what, I find that the origin story of people really fascinating.
Right.
And I was saying to Stuart, you know him as well, that I had the hypothesis that people will find the greatest purpose when they're helping a version of themselves in the world. So either they had a strong emotional event when they were younger, or their parents, they witnessed it, well, maybe their parents were impoverished, so they want to help the finances of the world in essence. So I'm just wondering what made you go onto the field that you're in? I know it's a heavy question. Answer what.
Well, it's a long story if you really...
Yeah, we're here, mate. We've got an hour.
So, I mean, I suppose I fell into it. I suppose I was raised in a very privileged background, typical kind of white male, middle class, kind of very privileged. Yeah. And went to private school and all those things, broken family as well. But also I kind of liked, I don't know, I was not always a good boy. And I did.
Yeah, I said something.
So I think I did some things that I wouldn't have got away with had I been brought up in a different kind of environment. And so that kind of got me involved in being interested in crime and why people are, why people commit crime and so on. And then worked with the homeless for a while as a volunteer with no money in that. And so I worked with that, and that was really opened my eyes and got to know more about people and the choices they make or the choices that they have taken away from them or can't make. And then so I worked as a probation officer in the UK for a long time where I trained and qualified and then became a forensic psychologist in the UK and so on. But I'm fast forwarding this bit because you want to know how I became a coaching psychologist.
I mean, I'm going to go back. There's
okay, you can go.
So far.
So anyway, so I came over here to New Zealand in 2000 as a forensic psych, and but I fell into coaching because I really enjoyed the training side of it and working with staff. And when in fact, an opportunity arose where I could work with someone who was actually doing some corporate work, and they were saying, look, could you do some work with a manager? They're a great technician, if you like. They're great at their job, but in their managerial role, they need to learn some softer skills. And so I did that particular job, and I said, so what is this exactly that I'm doing? And they said, well, it's coaching. And I said, I hadn't really heard about that. So I said, how does a psychologist become a coach? And this is around 2007 or even less, 2004, 5. And there wasn't really a field of that in New Zealand, and it was really new throughout the world, coaching psychology. And I asked a few psychs in New Zealand, including Stuart. I said, why don't we kind of band together and kind of get a forum for coaching psychologists? And so that's what we did. And we set up the Coaching Psychology Special Interest Group here in New Zealand in 2009, I think. And then, so kind of falling into it, and then kind of got involved first in the state sector, working in sort of as it was, Oranga Tamariki. I can't remember SIFs before, Child Youth Family, and with the police. Used to work with them in terms of training their staff, working with teams, and then word got about, and so I get more and more coaching with leaders. Just that's how I fell into coaching, leadership coaching.
The thing that stuck out for me, and I'm a bit simple at times, which probably helps some of the listeners as well. Forensic psychologist, what the hell what do you do? Do you just is it like, Criminal Minds, and you're like, this person has this archetype, so they're going to be at Wendy's at 2 p.m.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Forensic, I mean, I kind of wonder what forensic means. It just sounds quite fancy, doesn't it? And I think psychologists, I would, if we can come back to that at some point, I think psychologists have in the past and sometimes continue to take the high ground and dumbfound people with big words and all the rest of it, and I'd like to dispel some of that rubbish. Forensic is crime related, so you have these forensic examinations and those kinds, so it's crime related. So a forensic psychologist is a psychologist that works in crime related kind of field. And so, they might do profiling. I mean, I haven't done profiling myself, but that's, you're kind of looking at, often people will commit offences around where they live. Yeah. And might commit certain kinds of offences and so on. And so they try to build up a profile around, in this certain area, these kinds of offences are committed at such and such a time, and it tends to be these kind of people. And obviously there are risks around profiling, as we know, in terms of that certain sectors or ethnic groups will get stereotyped as being most likely to commit certain types of crime. I'll just throw in a little jib there also, how we as New Zealanders, men don't have a great record for domestic violence in this country, and there's some great work being done by Shine to address that. But certainly that would be our profile. New Zealand men don't have a great rap.
Yeah, wow. On the 2 Shine, I called them.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
I had a chat with them.
Oh, good. Get them on.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yes. That's not why I called them.
Oh, okay.
My friend was in a tough situation, so I called on her behalf to find out what's out there. And it's tough. And it was COVID, but it's really under-resourced and under-supported.
Very much so. Yeah.
And it sounded as though the person you're talking to is a filter.
Right.
Because you have to prioritize needs, and then you've also got the recurrence. A person that's suffering through domestic violence will make a ploy to leave, but then they have a tendency to return, and it's really quite a complex.
It's
issue.
really complex, absolutely. And I worked for various reasons, but I worked with both deeply psychological and just skill as well. But I ended up working with men who sexually abused children in forensic world. And, we wondered, or people do wonder, why do people, especially, children who know their abuser, why do they keep returning? And love is, there's a whole attachment to the people who abuse us, or people who are abused, and it is, as you say, a really very, very complex thing. And so it's you can't just kind of say, they should just leave. And in the case you're talking about, they should just leave their partner. Is a hell of a lot harder than that.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna get cancelled for this, but I think that I have a simple value that's controversial when it shouldn't.
We
be.
love it.
You love controversy, and it's me. I'm speaking for me, not Sam.
Yeah,
it's just like haters hate. No matter how justified the cause. And my interesting take on pedophilia, for example, is irrespective of what a person's done, murder, rapist, worst person in society's eyes, my objective is to have a net gain for the world. So I'm wondering if potentially there's a genetic component of pedophilia.
I think that's a really good question to ask. I'm not the person to ask the answer, but
you should avoid this question. People get cancelled for that.
Yeah, but I'm really loath. I think because I've got kind of older, to kind of say everything is black and white. I mean, I think I think one of the things, certainly for people who are attracted to children, is around them feeling loved and wanted, and that's really attractive. So if everyone, especially adult people, are rejecting you, children and animals are far less likely to reject you. And so for men who sexually abuse children, often there's all sorts of reasons, and I'm the wrong person to ask, but my understanding when I was working in the field, one of the things I picked up is that feeling of not being judged. There's all stuff around power and abuse of power, and those are really important considerations as well. But it's some men, and we're talking about men in this instance, will feel but women as much, I guess. But I'm talking about men will feel that they're being loved by this child and no one else can give them that love. It's very distorted, and it's our work to address that, or people who work with people who've sexually abused children to address and to kind of talk to that. But it's a good question. How, in terms of sexual attraction, back to pure basic sexual attraction, is there a predisposition that you're born with it?
And and then it's a incredibly dangerous topic, and the majority of people I come across think they should be burned on a cross and all these horrible things. It's just all I want for the world is to have a better society where we collectively support each other the best we can.
Right. Totally with you on that one.
And it's so controversial, which is out the gate. Like, for me, we'll move off controversial.
I was going to say, where have we gone with this coaching?
Well, let's not continue that. There's another one for me, and you don't have to speak on it, was that, so I'm vaccinated, boosted, all that. And for me, the segregation and alienation of the people that weren't crossed the moral boundary for me. Whether it was logistically made the most sense for people, whether it was the best outcome for society, and whether there's consequences for that person making the decision, it just highlighted to me that if we're put in a position where our own personal experiences are compromised, that we have a tendency to vilify and to objectify a certain person based on their choices and blame them. So you don't have to comment on that. That's another controversy.
Well, I will from a leadership angle. And
Okay,
kind of coming
go
back
on
to coaching, I think it's really important, because I think, that's a problem that's being faced by a number of organisations and agencies, and one which I'm working with at the moment. How do you reintegrate people who didn't get vaccinated back into the workspace? How do you re-embrace them? How do you then also work with the staff who kind of got vaccinated and all the rest of it, and they chose to stay and do the right thing in their eyes? So how do you reconnect people again? And I think that's an issue that organisations are facing at the moment, is especially where there was underlying tensions before. This just kind of exacerbated those kinds of tensions.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. We'll go that direction. So, what would you think from a leadership? Because there's two sides to the empathy coin. There's someone that feels fearful, and there's someone that feels vilified. In essence, so you got the person that's not vaccinated and the person that's fearful of the consequences for their health. From a leadership standpoint, what are some things to be mindful to pay homage to both perspectives to help integrate that?
It's good. I mean, it's good that you've just talked about fear, and we don't have to do big things, but draw me back, because I'll go off topic very briefly on fear. Okay. But I think that's the other thing, and I've just sent something out on LinkedIn around fear, but I really encourage leaders to engage with fear, because I think a lot of leaders, and others, kind of get frightened they can't be experiencing fear, or let alone showing it. And so fear is an important thing to engage with. So in terms of these two parties, if you like, is also about engaging with that fear, and also like with any kind of misunderstanding, or not necessarily misunderstanding, or different perspectives, is first of all to go and discover those perspectives, to go and find out how they've developed and what might be influencing those perspectives, and then kind of acknowledging them is really important, and then hopefully finding some common ground about, what's our common mission, for instance, what the common values that we have for this organisation. How can we kind of join together on how we meet those values? But I think there's a lot of groundwork to be done to go back and kind of pare back that sense of fear, vilification, isolation, disconnection. Those kind of things I think need to be also addressed as well.
Yeah, and you're talking about a very important concept of trying to merge a different point of view, is that there's, you probably heard about, the brain actually flips its lid, in the essence, there's actual physiological...
There's a technical term, that's it. Yeah, it's the flipping lid page, that's right. Yeah, go on.
Goes like this.
Yeah.
Exactly like that.
Just like that.
Yeah, simple.
Yeah.
But especially in selling and communication, you need to allow the person to land. And most people, the old sales model, which is agree. So, I 100% agree with you, disagree or whatever. And then relate. If someone else has said this. And then tell them why they're wrong. When the narrative should be, try to understand why you could be wrong. So you're actually exploring their mindset and trying to understand it empathetically, which allows them to land. And then their lid's not so much flipped. They're not in the emotional moment. They're not sort of resistant to an idea. And then that's when you can start approaching a meaningful conversation from it.
Yeah. And I think I think there are two things. I can't remember the second one because I had two things going through my head there.
Here you go.
But one of the first things I think is also to kind of not always necessarily look at kind of who's wrong and who's right or why they might be wrong, but it's kind of like how might these two kind of perspectives come to one kind of right or a shared kind of conclusion or a shared decision. But you're right, it's not always the situation where it's going to be grey and we can all compromise. There might be times when there's something around, no, you have to accept that if you are going to come back to work, there are certain ways that we have to do, like wearing a mask or whatever, or you can't work in certain areas that we work in because you haven't been vaccinated or you don't want to wear a mask. That's cool, but you cannot work in certain areas in order to keep our clientele safe.
Yeah. Now that's a fair differentiator with that, because I mean, I find, you know, people, whether it's like suicide, mental health issues, whether it's like these strong emotional experiences.
That's the other thing, yeah.
Oh,
sorry, the importance of managing your emotions. Sorry, the other thing, yeah, and I think you were talking about the most important. Well, one of the other important things is definitely to kind of cool down the temperature on the emotions, and you do that by kind of hearing them and reflecting them, yeah.
Yeah, massively. And I was going down the line of the support network for a person that's struggling, you know, with borderline personality disorder, mental health issues. There's people feel ill-equipped to navigate the emotions and to support that person. And they don't even need to understand all the psychological skills, have to have the qualifications as such. Some of the most valuable thing they can do is to listen. Because so often we try to solve the problem when the solution was actually just to feel heard. And I just thought I'd put that in there because there's people listening that might have someone in their life that has that sort of challenging emotional moment and they're not sure what to do, when a lot of what they could have done is just listen.
I wish I was allowed to take notes if we were talking. I agree with
I should talk less. Burst.
A heap of what, yeah, because I've got a short, small brain. So there's a whole heap of stuff that you've said there that's really important. I'd agree with, and I think one of the things I would like to say in the message, you know, for other people to hear is that we need to, and I think that's what you're implying, is we need to do much more about recognizing mental health mental illness in the workplace. And the other thing is also it's not only that we might know people, we might be some of those people who are facing mental challenges or psychological challenges from time to time. And you know, I learned a real lesson, obviously, when I was working with the homeless when I was very young. But even when I was in a probation officer, I was working in one of the largest, or the largest at the time, young offender institution in the UK, or in the Europe, but it's in the UK, called Feltham. I don't know if people may have heard of Feltham. But anyway, I worked with a guy, and we worked really well, and he was just magic. So he was a co-facilitator guy. And we worked really well together with the young men that we were working with. And then he'd go off sick for a wee while, and I wouldn't know what was going on. Anyway, we built trust, or he trusted me, which was great. I trusted him already. And then he came back one time. He said, "Sam, look, I experienced I'm bipolar," and I didn't know what that meant.
Oh, yeah.
So what I mean by bipolar is that it kind of going. Sometimes they'll be really manic and just go like 24/7, and can stay awake and be really sharp and all the rest of it, and almost it gets to a really bad extreme where they're not looking after themselves and kind of start having ideas that are really unrealistic. And then the other end of the pole is being really depressed and suicidal and so on. So that's what I mean by bipolar. I'm not a clinical psych, but that's more or less what it is. Yeah. And so he told me that. But obviously, you know, those times we were really clicking together and going really well and fast and all the rest of it, we were both kind of quite high, and they're kind of really full of energy. And he was really indefatigable, and he'd be just so cool at what he did. And I really missed that creativity he had. And on the other hand, you know, when he was off, it was often because he was really down and so on. And I guess what I'm saying is I'm sure there are other people, there are other people around the workplace who experience all sorts of psychological challenges to varying degrees and extremes. And in the workplace, I think sometimes, as you say, we're scared to recognise that. I think, you know, organisations are becoming more prepared to kind of face and engage with that and realise that most of the time we operate fairly well, but there will be times perhaps when some people don't operate as well. And it's just kind of creating an environment where they can say, hey, look, it's one of those times when I'm not operating quite as well. Can I take some time off? Or this is what I need you to do to kind of make sure I operate more effectively.
You're going to have some out-the-gate stories. I feel like I've got a few things in my head. Like, so, yeah, you know, you wanted to talk about fear at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And then also,
there's not a lot about fear, but yeah, go on.
Okay, well, then the other thing is one of the best and worst salesmen I've ever met.
Oh, yeah.
Was Ed.
You might find some people who are bipolar. Yeah.
Yeah, and he could cry on command. He was like manic, like on the level, just like would just never actually show the product, but sold it before they ever saw it. And he was just a remarkable communicator.
Yeah.
But that was not an important story to share. But it just made me.
Well, I think it's to normalise it, right? I mean, I can't remember. What's he called? Mork and Mindy. What was Mork's name?
Mork and Mindy, mate.
Robin Williams. I mean, he had
yeah.
bipolar, right? And there are lots, and Stephen Fry, and there's some real amazing, hugely intelligent, hugely energetic people who experience this on an everyday basis, and they learn how to manage it. But it's a big task.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. There's. I think there's, in my opinion, there's 2 challenges.
Only 2. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's simple. Black and white, like I said. No. The 2 main narratives that I think aren't helping mental health is one where it doesn't feel like an appropriate place to talk about it and there's a stigmatism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other side is where there's a certain aspect within a person's responsibility. So there's a person that has mental health, not their fault. Certain aspects of their responsibility. So I think that those 2 components, in my opinion, are actually... Because like I use the... kindness and nice, being nice and being kind, I differentiate that. Being nice is being a people pleaser and saying what everyone needs to hear. Being kind is being nice, but sometimes it's being, hey, there's a certain thing within your responsibility. I want to encourage and support you. I'll help this aspect. Are you willing to do a certain component within your control?
That's beautiful. And what's now being talked about now is they talk about compassion and what compassion is. So there's compassion-focused leadership, if you like, and so on. And it fits the narrative you've just talked about. So there's the nice bit, which you've talked about, which is kind of less attractive. And there's the compassion bit, which is kind of like having those courageous conversations, which might be kind of feel painful, but unless you have them, it's just being nice and not very productive. And also then there's self-compassion again. So in a coaching relationship, part of my job is to kind of say, well, this is very simply put, but saying to the leader in front of me, how compassionate are you being with yourself? And it's not about going to tell them to hug trees unless that's what they want to do, which might work with some people. But it's more about, you working 24/7 is actually really toxic and unhealthy. And it's unhealthy for you. It's unhealthy for the organization. It's unhealthy for your family. You need to get out, have a proper talk with yourself and own up to yourself that this is not healthy. And that's compassion, and that's being kind in the language that you're using.
Yeah, and I feel like we'll go to the coaching thing in a very soon.
Okay.
Is that
why I was here? I forget.
Yeah, so, I don't know. I don't know. I just called you and you seemed cool.
That's nice. That's nice.
But I think you've got some out the gate stories, surely. So when you're a probation officer, what is essentially your goal to try and encourage them not to mess up or to catch them when they mess up? And is there some interesting stories or crazy crimes that you came across? Or
yeah, I mean, look, there are always interesting stories and crazy crimes, but with a memory like mine, I can't remember many of them, to be honest.
Strategic role play.
But I can remember one which I will tell. Just remind me whiskey, and I'll remember to tell it. It's not a difficult one to tell, and I can own up to it. But yeah, it's not. So I think in the States, in America, probation is about also catching people doing wrong and bring them back and all the rest of it. So in the UK, my training, and I don't think it's changed, is around, the bottom line was always protecting the public. So whatever you're doing with this person is helping to protect the public. And so it's helping people to think differently or to think better strategies that are going to be not get them into trouble in the future. And I guess that's kind of similar to what coaching is. It's kind of like, what is a better strategy for what you're currently doing? And I guess with leaders, they're already doing stuff that's super, super cool, and you're just helping them to do even super cooler stuff. And with offenders, it's just kind of like, you're housing shit, and you're getting no income, and you got no job, and no one's going to employ you. And you and I have to somehow work out something that's going to stop you from reoffending, when the best choice, the easiest choice, and often the most logical choice is to reoffend. And so it's a real struggle. And then you got this posh white kid, with lots of money and all the rest of it, lecturing to these poor youngsters about how they should live their lives. So you've also got to build some trust around, why should I trust this kind of guy who can go home to his nice cozy home, and I haven't got a home to go to. So
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's tough. Like, I even had an example a few months ago. I was talking to someone that's murdered someone, which was just, my life's interesting. And
do the reverse. Yeah, as well.
but they were kicked out of Australia with this thing way back when. I can't remember what it was. And they were given $300 and, history of crime. And then, okay, here's your $300, 2 nights of accommodation. Now be a good citizen.
Yeah. So the question should be, is how do people not offend? That should be the research, is who are the people with who the opportunities to offend and what stop them from offending? And often the things are, dads have a lot of responsibility. I have to say, we have failed our kids miserably. I think we're changing now. So one of the big things I learned, and I think it's still true when I was studying criminal psychology, forensic psychology, is the involvement that men have on their, especially male children. So where kids feel they're connected with their families and they've got support around them, that really helps out. But as you say, $300 and 2 nights accommodation, why wouldn't I reoffend? Hopefully I wouldn't go and murder someone again, but why wouldn't I go and rob someone? What other choices I got if I'm really skilled at that?
Yeah, and Stuart actually was talking about, I asked him this question, I was like, if you were a dictator, if you had the ability with no bureaucracy to make a sweeping change to the criminal behaviour in New Zealand to sort of minimise it, and he was talking about focusing on the parenting component from ages 0 to 3. Because, I saw a TikTok video, I don't know how substantiated it is, but just whether it was rape, murder, crime, robbery, the percentage of them that had no fathers.
Oh, interesting.
Were like 80%.
I'm glad we got some consistency. Wouldn't that be awful? But let's say if we didn't, so good old Stuart. So yeah, that's good to know that we both share the same opinion anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and whiskey. Here's the reminder. You had a story of...
Okay, so it's quite early on in my career. I was this young probation officer in Hounslow. I can identify where it doesn't matter. Hounslow, a place in England anyway, which was part of Middlesex Probation Service, which no longer exists. And it was near Christmas time, and this guy, who I was supervising, so I said, I want to, you've been a really good probation. He was a toe rag. He was lovely. He was a cool guy, but he was naughty. Not bad, but just naughty. Anyway, so he said, I want to, give you a Christmas present for, you've been such a cool probation officer. I thought, what's coming? Anyway, so he pulls out this bottle of whiskey, nice, what was it, Glenmorangie, and he pulls out this bottle of whiskey and he says, here I am. And I'm thinking, so I say, where did that come? Oh no, I bought it. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, but I thought that's nice. Anyway, so what was there to do? Go and put it back or whatever. I said, well, I'm going to have to tell my senior probation officer that you've given me this thing. He said, no, that's fine. Anyway, so he goes off anyway. So I go and declare it to my senior probation officer, and we just, and I won't say who that was just in case it was the wrong decision, but at least I declared it. I said, look, what am I supposed to do? And he said, no, well, what can you do? You may as well keep it, take it home. But, there I'm making a judgment. He may well have paid for it, but my judgmental hat would be saying he probably nicked it.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
you're ashamed to your name.
Yeah.
What have you done, Sam?
Sorry, so it wasn't that. I was just looking at your face. So it probably wasn't that. That one bigger story, but to me, that's such a big story. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry, mate. I need to work on my face thing.
Yeah. I think one of the other things when I started working with sexual offenders is again I went into prison to interview like this again. When I was quite early on in my career and working with this particular guy. And he was in total denial. He'd been sentenced and all the rest of it, but he was still in denial. And we had conversations and all the rest of it. And I was really pleased with myself. But we had a conversation, and I just said, look, it must be really hard. Just as I was leaving, or about 5 minutes before I left, I said, look, okay, I accept that you don't want to acknowledge the offences and all the rest of it. I said, but it must be really quite hard to kind of live with some of those things, just chatting around just in your head and not telling anyone and all the rest of it. So all the way through, I've been non-judgmental and all the rest of it. Yeah. And then so I got up to leave, and he said, I got a really bad stomach and all the rest of it. He's going on that. So I said, well, that might be related to what you're holding in. And so just as I did, he said, some at that stage he wasn't admitting it all, but he said, some of what I'm accused with is true. And I thought, yes. Yeah. And I think, that's your work there, is enabling people you got to build that trust. And so for me, that was a rite of passage, if you like, that I'd found a way of working with people who commit really horrific offences.
Yeah, I mean that's just, it's a sad thing for me. Like, I mean, you're going to have young families listen to this podcast, and you're going to have all these people that like the abuse, something like 1 in 7 men are abused by the age of 18, women like even more. One in 6 sexually aggressive, like the partner was sexually aggressive towards them, and that hasn't changed over 100 years, which is sad.
Yeah, at least I think, but yeah.
And then that triggers such emotional events, and many important women in my life have had, either been raped or sexually assaulted. And it's just sad that experience that happens to them, as well as that a potential way to solve or prevent or minimize those things that happen is just looked over because of that hate and that emotional charge.
And it's totally understandable.
And I get it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But we're moving on from that. So we're going to coaching. That was a good story. It's such a dangerous topic. So coaching. So you got these non-profit organizations, and you got these leaders that are doing pretty well. Do you find a common trend with non-profit organizations between the ones that do well and the ones that don't? Like, because it's really quite hard to, like any business, to get high quality people, and their pay is not necessarily reflective of that. And the successful ones seem to have that, but then they got the public perception of that.
Oh goodness, that's such a huge question. I can't answer a lot of that. And
I should stop asking these questions.
But my experience is for a start. I think the first thing is certainly, and I think you reflect. Kind of way perhaps some people look at it is quite clear cut. Is some people what you don't get a good quality in not for profits, and there's a big division, separation if you like, and not for profits are led by people with a huge amount of experience. They may have come from the corporate sector, they may not have done, but I mean they're not like the fuddy-duddy not-for-profits we might have an image of. I mean, they're really, they're often in kind of managing quite multi-million-dollar budgets. They have, and even if they're not, they have a huge wide range of stakeholders that they have to deal with, from sort of community to government to their boards. And actually, in terms of boards, that might be kind of an area for growth in terms of, or development, should I say, because often. Some of the struggles can be in that sector around effective boards that support their CEOs. Some not-for-profits have fantastic boards, and some have quite mixed boards. But my experience is the not-for-profits that I'm working with, obviously the leaders I work with are fantastic at what they do, huge imagination, and as a kind of one in your eye for the corporate sector, far more resourceful in many respects, because they have so much less resources. They've got to be far more strategic in many ways, far more canny, and often having to deal. They haven't got bottomless pits of money, so they're working with staff who are often very, they come in because they've got a real passion, and so burnout can be a real risk. And so I'm here I'm challenging you in this moment. Just that get kind of that not-for-profits are hugely in many cases hugely effective organisation, but very challenged in what they're doing, and really resourceful in the way they manage it. And you should get them in. There are some amazing CEOs, the ones I've come across anyway.
You probably should get them in. Problem is, I'm a little jaded.
What do you mean?
Because I worked for a company. It was called APCO.
Right.
And it's one of the largest face-to-face marketing companies in the world that no one's heard of.
Right, yeah.
And they're the ones on the streets for the most part.
Oh, yes.
Representing the charities, which is really good for the charity because it's recurring revenue. They don't have to pay anything up front. And then they're just, But then the cut was 80% of the first year revenue for the marketing company. So
you need to get the not-for-profit, because I mean, this is not something I know about, but I think it's certainly one I'm aware of, is that discussion about the doorstoppers and the people on the street. And I hat off to the people on the street, but they're not making the money. The people on the street who are kind of raising the money, going around door to door or whatever. That's hard work.
The best thing I've ever learned.
Is it?
Yeah, and all I had was a clipboard and a shirt, and you just talk shit on the street.
So maybe it should be a part of university training as you go out on the street. There's some clipboarding.
The best trained salespeople I've ever met came from there.
Yeah.
And I raised a year and a half, $2 to $3 million, and it cost them nothing to do that apart from that first year. Yeah. But
I would say on that note, I mean, in terms of topicality, fundraising is a key challenge now for not-for-profits. I mean, it's really, the state sector will be, I imagine, cutting back, or the governments of the future will be cutting back on funding. And people are much more wary in their pocket about what they're giving, and also it's far more difficult to access. How do you know who to go? Like my generation, we read papers, and that's how you're get us to kind of donate. Whereas your generation might be looking at only certain areas of certain channels of information on the media. So how do you target the different channels?
Well, I mean, what you're talking about there around burnout, I think there's like marketing. I love it. I find it fascinating. And I think there's a burnout related to charity where the narrative is guilt trip. Create a certain emotional reaction that inspires people to contribute when the narrative should be switched to value.
And I think, that's one of the questions I think people are starting to think about is, absolutely that does need to change is how you get your hook in.
Sounds like I need interviews. I need to open up my eyes. I'll ask you later on if someone who you think's good. Okay, so you talked about an interesting thing around boards.
Yeah.
And there was a differentiator between successful and unsuccessful, or it helped at least.
Yeah.
Is there something you should be mindful of in shaping a board? Is it, having different mental mind maps? Is it having common values, common vision? Is this a stupid question to ask you?
Probably a stupid question to ask someone like me. Jeepers, I'm just a psychologist. I'm certainly not qualified. What my observation perhaps is, the CEOs or your leaders who felt supported by their boards are ones where their boards have communicated with their CEOs and supported them, but they've had a kind of common understanding of how the communication occurs and how often.
Okay.
That the CEO, that they back their CEO. That they're informed not just about the organisation, though that would be a start, but also about the sector, and also that they do lots of networking and so on in order to bring money in for that for the organisation. That's about the limit of my knowledge, but I think what I'm understanding is also, this is the other thing, and again around leadership, it's far more complicated than it used to be. You need to have your finger on the pulse, and it's not just about what's happening in the finances. There's other things to think about, like cybersecurity and those kind of things to think about. The board need to kind of be across. So, it's a lot more complicated, and I don't think, someone like me, someone with a good will or a do-gooder can't just go on the board. You need to know what you're doing, as that's the sense I get anyway.
Yeah, I think it'll be a sad day at the moment. I need a board for the business. I'm going to struggle. But it's an important distinction. So I've asked you a lot of not great questions.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thanks, thanks for that, Ryan. So it's been good.
But I think in your skill set, like instead of me asking a specific question and maybe it lands, it doesn't land, what do you think would be a good direction to add value in your skill set? Whether a question that would have been a good question to ask or something that you think leaders need, or
Okay, so two questions there that I picked up anyway. One is about my skill set and the other is about leaders.
Essentially, I want you to add as much value as humanly possible in your skill set, and I haven't done a great job of that thus far.
What do I need to talk about? What I do, if you like, or my skills?
Yeah, like that will help. Imagine I'm a client and you're trying to help, and we're not necessarily going through an interviewing process, but you're helping me understand something that's probably going to make me either a better leader or a framework I could use to be a better leader.
Right. Again, and that's and it's great because I'm obviously going to give you my point of view, but you ask another psych or another coach or another coaching psych and they'll give you a different impression. Okay. But I guess my approach, I think, just to say, because I was thinking, he's going to ask me what is coaching psychology and what's coaching. I'm thinking, geez, I don't know. but I think briefly, so if we understand coaching is about getting the best performance out of someone and getting them to be the best they can be, I think also the assumption is based that you've already got someone who's pretty skilled and probably, in my case, any more skilled than I am in many respects and certainly socially quite powerful in job-wise and so on. So they're really sharp people. So what works for leaders, and then I'll tell you what I would ask a leader, but what works for leaders, or in any coaching, what works in coaching probably, obviously it's nice to have a background in psychology, and I'd highly recommend it in order to understand how people think and to understand some theories. And so coaching psychologists do have they'll bring psychological theories to how they work, and I think they're really valuable to coaching, and I can talk about those shortly. But I think assuming I've got that skill set and knowledge, one is about building the relationship. So I might have be able to build a good relationship with you, but someone else I just can't. So that's really important. Just having being able to build that rapport. That's the first thing. So building trust and so on. And there's a guy, for those scientists out there who there's a guy called Eric Dahan, and he writes a lot around relationship and coaching. And then the other bit is about the kind of skill bit is about enabling people to kind of focus on their goals or their strategy or their ideas. So one is just being able to build a relationship, and the other one's working on the content. And so another skill set for coaching is once you've kind of made people at their ease and given that psychological safety to the relationship, is to ask some really good questions. Now, I don't have to, in my opinion, as a coach, I don't necessarily have to know about your job as a podcast interviewer or as an investment person of finances. But hopefully I can have enough about what you've told me about yourself that I could, like you're doing with me, is just ask some questions that makes me think. So being able to drop in questions at the right time and in the right way that makes me think beyond what I've already thought about. But it's already in me.
Yeah.
So that's the skill, if you like, of a good coach, and being able not to interrupt too often, which is something I need to work on. So that's it. So in terms of my approach with leaders, I use an approach, and Stuart may have talked about this. I use an approach called acceptance and commitment coaching, or acceptance and commitment therapy.
Yeah,
so it comes from ACT. There you go. So acceptance and commitment coaching, that's now called for coaching, because sometimes if you say acceptance and commitment therapy, people think I haven't come here for therapy, I've come here for coaching. So we talk about acceptance and commitment coaching. But the idea, I hope I'm not repeating myself if I tell you what, I'm not repeating people if I talk about ACT.
No one's really gone in depth on that. So maybe Dr. Emma Woodward. I'm just stalling you so I can push the button on the camera again.
Oh, yep.
You're off, yep.
Okay. So with ACT, kind of the key things to know about ACT, and what I love about ACT, and I say here I go on another tangent again, but I think it's relevant, is I think in the past, psychologists have used these really complicated terms to describe what they do, and it becomes a very inaccessible kind of field, and we're kind of put in this kind of, oh, don't look at me kind of stuff. And I really want to simplify what psychology is in the sense of, we're human like everyone else. And what I love about acceptance and commitment therapy, or acceptance and commitment coaching, you can just tap it into the internet and you'll find out heaps of really good ideas. Russ Harris is someone who's really got some lovely videos, and like little 3-minute videos telling you about ACT and so on. It's just a really accessible kind of psychology. And the idea is, what do you value is the most important. That's the kind of the first starting place, if you like, with acceptance and commitment coaching, is kind of what are your values, dear leader. And so the leader will tell me what they stand for. It might be reputation, it might be family, it might be a number of things. And you narrow that down. So what are your top 3 to 5 values? Okay, well, that will guide our work. So in our work over the next few sessions that we're working together, I will keep in mind that those are your core values, because every time you go off it, I'll be challenging you about, well, how's that fit with your value set? Or I'll be supporting you if it fits with you. So that's the kind of, you identify the values, and then okay, so the commitment bit is about us committing, or you in particular committing to those values. And I think, people at my stage of life in particular are kind of wondering, or CEOs might be thinking, I've been doing this job for X amount of years, and I'm not sure I want to carry on doing my job, or I'm not sure we're going in the right direction, or the company needs a change. And then we kind of borrow down, well, what do your values, what kind of ideas you get from your values? And then we'll look at that. So that's a committing to your values. So you might think, well, I need the money, I need the mortgage and all the rest. It's just, well, how's that fit with, family is also part of your value set, as well as reputation. And you've done a lot for reputation. What's the cost for your family, and how are you going to go about there? So where's your choice? You've got to choose between, not between the two, but maybe put one on a back burner and the other you start prioritizing. That's in a nutshell. It's a little bit more complicated than that, obviously, in the discussion. And the acceptance bit is and this is what I love about acceptance and commitment coaching or therapy is kind of, we've all got little monkeys in our heads, we've all got bad things, and rather in the old days, and it works for some people, it's kind of like try and ignore them or reassure your voices, or kind of say, one of the voices is, you're not good enough, and rather than kind of say, you are good enough, it's okay. It's kind of like, no, I hear what you say, this is to your voice. It's kind of saying to your voices, I know I'm not, that's part of my kind of script, if you like. That's part of my internal dialogue, is I'm telling myself I'm not good enough. And it's kind of, okay, I've heard you. I'm now going to focus on the other stuff. So it's kind of hearing the voices, that's the acceptance, or making room for those uncomfortable thoughts that we have, not denying them, not negating them, but kind of saying, I've heard you. And, there may be a reason why I'm thinking that. It's not true now, but it might have been true in the past. But I want to focus on, this is good for the family, or this is good for the, my reputation. And that's why, and it will be painful. I'll still be hearing I'm not good enough. And that's part of my journey. Or, you really, like as a dad, I'll be thinking, you're screwing up as a dad all the time. You fuck that up or whatever, right? And it's true that I have, but it's not going to help me to focus on that. What do you call that? Like dialogue, that kind of narrative. Yeah. There you go. That's the word. So not focus on that narrative is kind of like, okay, that narrative is there, but choosing to focus on something that's more helpful.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I've been exploring with acceptance and commitment therapy, and also the three. Because part of what I'm trying to think about is creating a scalable way to help people live fulfilling lives. So I've been first I worked on me because people scared the shit out of me. So I did commission-only selling. So I had to do it every day. Exposure therapy. So I got better at it. And then the next component was like, oh, people are really unhappy when they don't have their finances in order. It's a key component of that.
Sure.
So now I'm in the like, well, how do I add value in a scalable way from the emotional component, and what's the tools that I could use? And I was leading towards motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, or ACT, but I didn't think about that as helping a CEO. Or
okay.
But it makes complete sense. They're defining their values. Your job is really to ask the right questions. They've got all the answers.
Yeah.
Just a random rant there, but
no, that's right. And I love the way you said, they define the values, because I was thinking about your scale rather than you defining the values, is they define the values. Because if you're selling a financial package, you can sell it on all sorts of angles. It still will meet their values, but you need to find their values for it, and then you use your motivational interviewing skills to kind of say, well, how does that fit with your values? And they kind of say, oh, well, money's a dirty thing. And you think, okay, so you're thinking money's a dirty thing, but how will it become attractive? And you're transparent about it. You say, what will make it okay for you to accept that you need to invest in something? I mean, obviously you're not going to invest in weapons, for instance, but in terms of just investing, I don't like the idea of investing at all. Passive income is not okay. And then you kind of unpack. So we got to work out a way of investing your passive income in a way that fits with your values.
Oh, that's massive. People's mindset around money, like, whatever I've sold through my whole life, it doesn't matter what it is. It's exactly that. It's the values, their goals, and what they're trying to achieve. And you would notice with salespeople, the price they charge was proportionate to their self-worth.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
But then there's also like their perception around money. So like, I'll offer to do a financial plan, it costs a certain amount of money. People will be emotionally invested in it, but their experiences of money will see that as a high price. So they don't have, they never had a whole lot. And then you have someone that's had a whole lot, and then it doesn't seem that much, but then I explain it wrong, so they don't think it's worth much.
I'm just as I'm thinking about that, as it echoes in my head that it's self-true. As I said earlier in this interview, is nothing is kind of clear cut, because it's not just about self-worth, obviously, is it? No, because I mean, obviously, people might charge or might have a value for money that's also based on other things, or make a choice. It's actually, I'm going to set it at a certain value because I'm being very deliberate about it, rather than kind of. But as you say, self-worth can be a real influencing factor, and I think so in the work that you do, I think self-worth. And with leaders in both their own and those anti and pro-vax, self-worth will come into that discussion as well.
Oh, it's so important, and that was a big mistake. So in that marketing company, I was doing the leadership and direction of a team of 15, and then I was training leaders to lead. And the biggest mistake I made was trying to teach people technically how to sell, because that's what was me. I was very analytical. I was in a stress zone. So I just wanted a process to execute consistently. I don't want to talk about my feelings, just get done. And that's a new lesson that I've learned even the last few years, is just actually focusing on the underlying belief system that's leading them to not push things or not to ask the tough questions. Because in essence, the first person you have to sell to is yourself. And if you believe in what you do, any person you don't sign up, you're doing a disservice to them. And if you can't help them, well then, send them on their way, find someone else that can. But I'll just be curious from a scalable way, because I know you're not so much in that psychology side of things, but you are more on the organizational and coaching side. Is there a way for, whether it's a psychologist, whether it's someone like myself trying to create a scalable approach, is there a way to make mental health support accessible to the masses?
Oh yeah, you said they were easy questions, eh?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how I can answer that. Okay, so the angle I'm coming in on, but there are all sorts of angles, and I'm sure you know them, other ones too. But I guess I'm thinking about now. So mental health is, I guess, like physical health. It's something that we can't take for granted. And I think, unfortunately, the mismatch or the kind of dissimilarity is the fact that we can't see mental health so much, whereas we can see if we look overweight or whatever.
Yeah, I see that every morning.
So it's all in the mind anyway, but it's our own self-judgment. So that's an important thing, so, and that's, I suppose, there are things that we can do to keep ourselves physically fit, but in terms of mental fitness, and the two are related, in fact, if we kind of do something for our physical fitness, that can also boost our mental wellness as well. But I guess there are things to do, in terms of, there are kind of the more cerebral things, right? Doing mindfulness or meditation, but there are also sort of perhaps even easier things is interacting with I'm sure you've heard about gratitude is being grateful for what you have, or when you see stuff around you, is just being a little bit more conscious of the things that you enjoy around yourself. I don't know whether it's greenery or the job that you have, or just so noticing the positive things in your life as well. So that's another way of noticing it. Certainly connecting with family. So some people will be familiar with Te Whare Tapawha, or the 4 pillars of the house, the Māori model that Mason Jury thought up, I think, in the late 70s. And the idea that, looking after whānau or being connected with whānau or your social connections is really important with family. The other one is around looking after your physical health, so eating well, sleeping properly, those kind of things. That's the physical health. The tinana and the wairua is your spirit, so either if you believe in a god or connecting with nature, or just your sense of self and your sense of connection with the earth. And then your thoughts, so what's that? Hininaro, so the thoughts and emotions. So what you read, what TV, if you're watching the media too much and it's pulling you down, choose to do something different. Mix with people where the conversation's nicer. But so I'm talking, mental health is about managing that on a regular basis. So it's making sure those things are always in balance as much as possible. And there are chemicals obviously in our bodies that we want to keep in balance as well. And so kind of running and kind of getting our adrenaline up at the right levels, or kind of getting some satisfaction, our dopamine or whatever, kind of feeling good. So maybe completing tasks will help our dopamine levels. So keeping that kind of sense of completion done. So there are kind of things we can do on a regular basis just to kind of keep our everyday mental wellness. And then, of course, that's all the stuff we can make choices about what we do. And then there's the stuff which is less, and we talked about this off air, if you like, the idea that there aren't always the resources available. I'm talking like, organizations available to support mental health. And that's harder when people are trying to get hold of a psychologist or get hold of a counselor and so on. And so it may be possible perhaps to join groups that focus on psychological well-being, or on a more primitive or kind of more basic level, shall I say, join the local sports club and, do the sports that you enjoy. I mean, that's just as therapeutic sometimes as a bunch of people talking about, what they're thinking and feeling.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, even the discussion around dopamine that you mentioned, like you see that in addiction, it's not really regulated that well. Their dopamine window is so narrow for them to enjoy that reward chemical. It's quite tough. So this guy, the Huberman Lab, I don't know if you know, he's a professor at Stanford University, and he's like, flip a coin when you get a coffee. Like things that make your dopamine sort of surprise yourself in a sense. So it's not a consistent, like I wake up, I have this food. It's sort of encouraging those pathways to still expand your ability to enjoy the simple things. And I think there's something, at least from successful people that I come across, is that their baseline, like people might aspire to be them, but their baseline of dopamine is so narrow for them to enjoy something meaningful, or they're chasing this goal, but they don't actually feel a level of fulfillment because the stimulus needs to be much greater.
It's interesting you say that, and I think you described that dopamine hit really well. So that's just nicely said. I'll make a note of that. So I always want to take notes. So that would have been good.
You're going to bail me up. I can sense it.
But so I shouldn't say but from a motivational interviewing approach. I say and.
Yeah.
So and as well as that, I would say a lot of CEOs. I'm just thinking about the successful CEOs I can think of actually have, in the way you're talking, is probably a low threshold because they have quite diverse things. You know, they'll go out running, so they find little things to keep them satisfied and happy. So they'll kind of, I don't know, they might do, you know, fill in the drawing or whatever, or they might go running, or they might be part of a club, or just doing something different, or they've got a hobby. I mean, I don't know how they do it. These CEOs, I mean, they're very good at managing their time, and I think that's core. Actually, is about how you manage your time, because they do like things that would take me a year to do. They seem to do in a day, and it's just they're much more effective at managing their time. So, but I think those successful ones who are able to find pleasure in many things,
No, that's good. Yeah, good call. Good and. Because the reality is, when I said that, I was thinking of a young person that's found themselves into wealth and how people resent them, and they're like, but you probably wouldn't want that life. And you think about it as well, like young children going onto their social media, and they're getting that dopamine.
Right, and that's not so good. Yeah,
and they're not developing emotional regulation and the ability to navigate uncomfortable situations and anxiety and depression. I know, as we wrap this up, because it's been an hour.
Cool.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, is it true that it appears to have more anxiety and depression than before? Is it that we're more focused on mental health to support it? Or if so, what do you think might be contributors to why there's these young people out there suffering?
Oh my golly. So that's a short, easy question for the finish, isn't it? 5 minutes. But I suppose, thank you. So I suppose my response with that, and I was just having a chat with someone at lunchtime just now, and I think, and the media's got, the mainstream media, I think in particular, has got some answers to have here. I think we're probably, we're focusing on the wrong thing. There's heaps of good stuff going on out there. There are heaps of kids who are coping fine. There are heaps of families who are doing well. And it's asking them the questions, how are they doing it? And they're finding things to keep themselves doing, and they're finding things to connect with them. They're finding what they could do. Then it doesn't have to cost money, but it's about doing different things, or noticing what the things that they're enjoying. Noticing what their kids are doing, maybe kind of participating in different things. I mean, maybe time again, but certain times with social media, but certain times playing Monopoly or something, I don't know. But I think there are some not so good things there, and I do think anxiety is going up and some of the mental health challenges going up, and that's a natural reaction to the pandemic and the way we feel about what else is happening in the world and climate change and so on. And I don't want to negate or minimize those things, but in an acceptance and commitment way, it's kind of, those things are happening, but it doesn't. We can choose to spend a lot of time focusing on the crap that there is, or to focus on all the kind of really hot stuff that's going on. And I'm sure you've already done this, and you're in amongst them. There are a lot of young people like yourself who are doing massively important things, and with new ideas, new ways of creating stuff, new ways of making it accessible to other people. And if those of us who were kind of getting all doom and gloom, we just take our blinders off, our blinkers off, we can join that wave. And I kind of really, as you can tell, get very passionate when people start moaning and groaning. I'm thinking, true. You got to just see some of the other stuff that's going on.
It's a good point. There's the old saying, is the world getting worse, or are there just more newspapers?
Yeah, nice statement to finish on.
But it's true. I feel that it's one of the best times in civilization to be alive. We don't have the World War I's, World War II's. A lot more people have access to clean water, internet, food. There's certain challenges at the moment, but and even like there's no distribution costs. If you have a phone, you had the ability to make money doing anything. There's a guy makes money. He gets a treadmill. He puts pool balls on them with numbers on them, and he takes bets live while they roll on the treadmill, and whoever's last is the one that wins. Cool.
So it's about that inventiveness. If I can, I've got time to end on one.
Yeah.
So I guess the other thing is in my work in the humanitarian field, it was asked to go to Kabul to Afghanistan rather than went outside to one of the provinces outside.
You went to Afghanistan.
Yeah, and
see,
but this is
the thing. You have these stories. We need to.
But this is pre the second wave of the Taliban.
Yeah.
But I think it would still be valid. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say? What can I possibly do? But it's true to a lot of places I go. But I was just thinking this particular instance. I'm thinking, what can I possibly do to help these people manage their stress in a different way? And I can't give them anything else. But I think it's reminding them of what's important to them. So going back to those values and reminding them how they connect with their families and so on. And I think here we are in our world, kind of getting all doom and gloom, and it's kind of like, by comparison to what the others, you know, we are extremely lucky. And even in those really difficult places, and I guess Ukraine and other places as well, people are experiencing immense suffering. And at the same time, there's a huge amount of spirit, and this is what I saw in Afghanistan and many other places, is people who survive that are the people who connect themselves with other people, who focus on what's really important and don't kind of try and kind of imagine stuff that they at that moment cannot have, because, or the situation, and they've been through war, years and years of war, and it's that's horrific. I don't know how people cope with that, but they cope with it because they think about what's in hand right now. How can they connect? What can they do for their family right now? And for many of them, obviously, their faith in Allah, which it's good if you think about the Feast of Eid right now on Sunday and so on. This is a good time to talk about that. But you know, it's about, so faith in Allah is obviously, if you're religious, that's great. Your family, connecting with others, finding food on the table or whatever, just noticing what's good about it. You look at Viktor Frankl and his survival in the concentration camps. And he survived just by kind of, well, what's going well today? What have I done that's been in line with my values today, this moment, that's kept me going?
That's mad, eh? Was it you, man that knows his wife can handle almost any what or how, something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Epictetus, I'm on a quote run.
Nice.
I don't know why. Man doesn't suffer by a crisis, but by his interpretation of it.
Beautiful. That's a great finish. Yeah.
The mad thing is, 1% of the population, the top 1%, you know, they have Occupy Wall Street and they're all worried about them. If you're earning over 37,000, you're top 1% in the world. I think we got to remember that.
Yeah.
But speaking of the people, the non-profit organizations or CEOs or people that want a bit of guidance on coaching, how do they find you to hear more about your Afghanistan story? So what's a good link?
Okay, that's very kind of you. So they can look either on LinkedIn. My name's Sam Farmer, coaching psychologist, or they can look for Enhanced Facilitation Limited is my website. Those are two places probably best to find me. Or ask around as well. Definitely ask around in the sense that don't phone me up until you've checked me out. So yeah, check out my LinkedIn profile or check out Enhanced Facilitation Limited, and then find out who you might know who knows me and see what they think of me, and then come and chat with me.
Oh, look at that confidence. I like it. Well, I'll leave the links in the description.
I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on. It was interesting.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. I value that. Thank you.
No worries.